Hello. If you are brand new to homeschooling, if you've just pulled your kid out of public school and are starting the journey, or you're just exploring your options around homeschooling, this video is for you. If you have done one Google search about homeschooling or how to homeschool my kid, you probably know that you immediately will get inundated with all the curriculums, all the sales pitches, a million different learning styles. And if you go into a Facebook group of homeschoolers and you ask 100 moms, how do I start homeschooling my kid? You might get 200 different answers. And that can be confusing and super overwhelming. My name is Susan Martin, and I'm a homeschool coach. And my goal is to bring together homeschool moms in a supportive community with a clear running path to help confidently educate our children and spark the joy of learning in them. Now, that sounds like a tall order, I know, but I believe that I can show you how to get there and give you some clear rails to run on and an easy step-by-step process to find what works best for your family, because we all know what works for one person may not work for another. I was homeschooled for most of my education, and I'm now in my seventh year of homeschooling my kids. We have neurodivergent kids in our home. We have trauma kids in our home. And I'm a homeschooling mom of a blended family. We have 5 kids all together. And I was a single mom when I started homeschooling my kids. So, whatever challenges you're facing in this idea of homeschooling, trust me, I've been there. And I want to assure you that there is a clear and easy path for finding what works best for you and your family. But it doesn't start where you think it does. So when you search homeschooling my kids or how to homeschool my kids, you probably get flooded with a whole bunch of different ideas. And everybody wants to think that books, curriculum, and teaching styles are where we start. But I'm going to offer you a different suggestion and a different path that will help you find what uniquely works best for your family. And so today is day one of Homeschooling 101, and I'm going to guide you through this process. So, the first step you're going to want to do as you pull your kids out of public school is a deschooling. Now, you might be asking, what is deschooling? There's not a lot of talk about this out there, but I think it's one of the most important and vital steps to take when you're transitioning from traditional school methods to homeschooling your kids. See, homeschooling is different than public school. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a beautiful option is it can suit those neurodivergent kids. It can suit those kids that have trauma. It can suit kids that have been bullied maybe in the public school system. And now you got to bring them home and help them kind of recover and rest and emotionally decompress. And that's what this deschooling process is. And even if your kid is not traumatized by the public school system. Maybe you've moved to a different area and you're not a big fan of the schools in that area. And so you just made the decision to homeschool for whatever reason. Even if there's not trauma or neurodivergency, if your kids have been thriving just fine in the public school system, I think the deschooling process is just as much for mama as it is for the kiddos. And it gives you a time to kind of process and pivot in a loving, compassionate, helpful, healthy kind of way. Okay. So, what is deschooling? It's a period of time that you take for that transition to honor the transition from traditional school to homeschooling. It's not only beneficial, but essential for your homeschool transition. And here's why. You have been in a certain mindset, and maybe you've only ever known traditional school, and this idea of homeschooling is totally brand new. And it sounds exciting to adapt schooling to suit your kid, but you have no idea where to begin. And so deschooling gives you some time as the mom, as the parent, to wrap your brain around what will work best for your family while your kids are resting physically, mentally, and educationally in this period. Now, it's not a time frame that lasts forever, so don't worry, they're not going to fall behind. Okay, so we'll get to that. But The period of time that you want to deschool, so when you take your kids out of public school or the private school or whatever, when you take them out of traditional school, you're going to take the recommendation is 1 week to 1 month per year that they were in traditional school for your deschooling period. So, how does that work out? Well, if your kid has been thriving in the private school system and or the traditional school system, right? So your kid has been doing just fine and you just decided maybe for the life circumstances that you're in or whatever to make the transition to homeschooling. Maybe you don't like seeing the direction that public school education is going in, or you see that it's not serving your kid, but they've been doing just fine in that system as far as you can tell. I recommend taking 1 week per every year they've been in school. So if it's a third grader, kindergarten, first, second, third, that's 4 years. You're going to take 4 weeks to deschool. Now, with a lot of you, your kids are either neurodivergent, they've been getting bullied at school from kids or teachers, which is really tragic. They've had experienced some kind of trauma. Maybe, like there's a scale, right? There may be some traumas there. Maybe they experienced a lot of rejection from their peer group and they need to recover from that. That is a form of trauma. Maybe there were teachers that said hurtful things to them. And there may be, I want you to give a little grace for yourself because there may be things that you as the parent aren't fully aware of. But as you get in this deschool process, you will get to learn a little bit more. Maybe your kid will open up and share what they've been going through. And you'll want to kind of treat this deschooling period with a little bit of flexibility. So you may go into it with a mindset of, okay, the math works out, we're going to take 6 weeks. And then as you get into it, you learn that your kid actually was facing some things that they weren't sharing with you. You may extend that deschooling period, but just know that this isn't going to last forever. It's just kind of a detoxification to get the public school or the institutional mindset out of both of your minds and allow a period of healing. Okay. So, if your kid is neurodivergent or has experienced some bullying, or maybe there was some trauma, you'll want it to be closer to that 1 month per year. Now, I know for some of you, if your kids are in middle school or high school and you're thinking, how are we not going to fall behind? Fall behind. Okay. So I use big quotes because as we go, you'll learn. Kids learn what they need to learn when they need to learn it, regardless of what a curriculum says. So just rest in that. But for middle school, high school kids, you may be looking at, okay, for example, my son was going into the 7th grade. That means he had already spent 7 years in the system and was experiencing extreme bullying. He had high anxiety around school, was like throw a fit, almost like a 5-year-old tantrum when we would have to get ready for school some days. So talk about a level of trauma, it's like way up here. So really we needed to take 7 months, 7 months to de-school. Now don't worry, they're not shutting off their brains and sitting in front of the screen playing video games for that whole 7 months or whatever that de-schooling time period is. So they are still learning because kids are natural learners. They have a natural curiosity about them. And this deschooling period actually allows you to press the pause button on textbook expectation and give a green light to natural curiosity and reawakening their love of learning. Now that sounds a lot more exciting, right? Okay, so that's your time frame. What do you actually do during that time? Well, I kind of alluded to it already. What you do in that deschooling time frame is you let go of all expectations. And I know that's really, really hard. It's really hard for some of us mamas, some more than others. But here's what I'm going to challenge you to do is no shopping for curriculums. We're not even looking at curriculum yet because right now we're letting your kid rest and recover from one way of school and education. And we're going to allow their brain time to heal and shift gears, but also for you. You, mama, may have in your head, okay, we've got to hit math and reading and science and English and diagramming sentences and this and this and this. And you've got this running list of the outside pressure of what they say needs to be accomplished. But I'm going to ask you to trust me, allow me to hold your hand and guide you through this process, and let go of those expectations just for these few weeks. Okay. It's really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not very long, but I promise this deschooling process gives back so much more than what you think you'll fall behind. Okay. So, what you actually do during this time is you become a student of homeschooling and everything that it can be. And it can be a beautiful discovery for you as the mom without the pressure of giving spelling tests or making sure your kids do a specific curriculum or follow a tight schedule, or like, this is the worst thing you could do actually, is when you start homeschooling, is take that public school broken system that was failing your child in some form or fashion and bring it home and recreate it in your living room or your dining room table. That is like mistake number one that I see so many new homeschoolers make. And it's to the detriment of themselves because you're putting undue pressure and expectation on yourself from an outside source that wasn't serving your kids anyway. And then you're putting pressure on your kids who are just coming out um, of a possibly traumatic situation. They need time to heal and recover. Okay, so I've probably beaten that horse to death at this point. So I just want to implore you, trust me, this does work. They actually won't fall behind. They actually may fly ahead. So, what you do during this time, I know everybody wants to know, but what do I do? What do I do? What do I have my kid do? They can't just be sitting and staring at the TV or playing video games all day. No, as you get to know me, you'll know I have a love-hate relationship with screen time. It has been the bane of my parenting existence for as long as I can remember. I've always had this battle with screen time, and I feel like the more screen time my kids get, the worse their behavior is, and the more screen time they want, and it becomes this horrible vicious cycle. And so, no, you definitely want to limit screen time. Whatever minimal amount your family can deal with. It's whatever works for you, right? So for our family, we do like a special movie night once in a while. Um, I will occasionally let my kids watch something educational. Like right now, they're watching Wildcrafts, so they can be quiet while I'm recording. But once I'm done recording, we're done with TV. So limiting those screen times and those access to devices is definitely number one. Your kids are going to tell you they're bored. That's good. Let them get bored because boredom leads to creativity. It is not your job as the parent to entertain your children all the time. And they don't need to be entertained all the time because when they're being fed entertainment, it actually kills their curiosity. So let them get bored, limit screen time. Now, options for things they can do during this time. First of all, you're going to let their little bodies sleep as long as they need to. And this is the first thing that so many new homeschoolers discover is like, my kid has never slept this much in their life. Like, seriously, they're going to sleep like 10, 11, maybe even 12 hours. Yes. Yes. And let them, their body will find their natural sleep rhythm. Okay. And there's a lot of physiological recovery that needs to happen in this transition. So let it happen. They don't need to get up at 7 a.m. to do school. They just need to rest. Okay. So let their natural sleep rhythm kick in. You can have a bedtime, you can have a routine. I'm a big fan of having consistency and routines in our family. We need that to function as a family unit, right? But You don't have to have this rigid schedule like 7 a.m. you're up, 8 a.m. we're doing this, like I don't know about you, but on the weekends, that's probably not how your house runs. I know for us, that's not how our house runs on the weekends. So let them rest and recover, get as much sleep as they need, limit the screen time, encourage outdoor time, encourage creativity, and just observe. When your kids get bored, make a note to yourself. What are they drawn to? Are they, like my 11-year-old, she'll go in the kitchen and start baking something. My 4-year-old will get out the dinosaurs and start playing dinosaurs. All of those things are okay. And they really are actually learning. Like, don't tell my 11-year-old that she's using math and adding and multiplying fractions when she's baking and doubling and tripling batches, right? So let them be creative. My oldest son, the 19-year-old, he's now 19, but he was the one that kind of inspired us to jump in and start homeschooling. He was very not wired for the classroom. And so the things he was drawn to were like Legos, building things, writing books, drawing. He has written so many novels. He would have a stack of like 10 spiral notebooks that he was writing in. And he didn't want to journal his feelings yet. That's fine. But he was writing stories. And it's another thing to pay attention to. So make notes. Don't push them in one direction or other. Let their interests lead them. And they are learning. Like when my son was writing books, he was learning grammar. He was reading voraciously because he wanted to learn different styles of writing and analyze how that was being communicated. My 11-year-old, she loves to bake. She loves arts and crafts. She's always coming up with new business ideas for selling her jewelry or whatever she's making at the time. And those are brilliant. Those are brilliant ways of learning. So during this deschooling time, let their curiosities lead them. You just make mental notes of what interests and intrigues them, where they're drawn. Take them to a library. Go on nature walks. Nature walks are an awesome way to connect and get to know your children, and also discover what's around in like a low pressure kind of way. Like, oh, like what kind of, is that an evergreen or a deciduous tree? Like this is how homeschooling works, right? So we'll go on a nature walk, and my 4-year-old loves picking up bugs and earthworms. And what 4-year-old boy doesn't, right? So he'll pick up stuff off the ground and he carries the little earthworm with him. And as we're walking, he'll ask, we were for a hike last fall and he had this little earthworm he's taken with us on the hike. And he's like, I love my worm. I love my worm. And we say, okay, but buddy, when we're done with the hike, you got to put him back on the ground. Well, why? Well, because this is this is how earthworms live, and he'll die if you just carry him in your hands. Well, I don't want him to die. And so like he has this tearful goodbye with his earthworm, wormy, and he's crying the whole walk. And then we get home and he's like, I want to learn more about earthworms. So we go to the library and we get library books on earthworms. This is what deschooling kind of looks like. You just let their interests lead, and you make mental notes, because we'll use this later as we begin to discover what curriculum and teaching methods and all of that stuff. We'll get to that later. Right now, just let your kids be kids. Let them recover, and let them be who they are. Let them heal, okay? And you get to be a student and just kind of take mental note of what they're interested in. And at the end of this video, I'll have a couple of book recommendations for you to start exploring what homeschooling can look like. So, deschooling versus unschool. You'll hear these two terms in the homeschool world. So I'll just give you a quick little definition. So deschool is what I've been talking about. It's this short period of time between leaving the institutional school system and homeschooling, where you take this intentional pause to Rest, recover, and pivot. Whereas unschooling is a style of learning that is much like what I described, but it's not for a limited period of time. Unschooling is the approach that says kids learn best by interest led learning, and we're not going to have any textbooks. We're not going to have, for the most part, there are unschoolers that will use some textbooks, like for math or whatever. But it's this philosophy that kids will learn what they need to learn when they need to learn it, and that learning is done best by curiosity, interest led learning, and play. And so unschooling just takes that time frame off of it and says this is just how we're going to learn. So I want you to be aware of these two terms because you will see it thrown around. What I'm asking you to do is deschool, and I understand that there's a lot of pressure, maybe from families and in-laws and whatever, that friends, the neighbor, parents of whatever. They're all going to have their opinion, but this is just an intentional pause. Think of deschooling as just an intentional pause to shift. Okay. And it's a mindset shift for your kids, and it's a mindset shift for you. Okay. So trust this process. You and your kids need time to heal and adjust. A lot of this stuff I've already said in here. Don't worry, your kids are not going to fall behind. This is a new learning approach. This is homeschooling itself is brand new to you. Give yourself grace. There is a bit of trial and error involved. You're not going to ruin your kids by homeschooling. They're not going to be, their education's not going to be detrimentally ruined if you take, 7 months or 10 months to de-school and make that mindset shift. I promise. Don't buy or even research any curriculum yet. Okay, we will get there. And most importantly, be willing to let go of the institutional way of doing school so that you can open up space for and embrace the homeschooling way that's going to serve your family. Use this time, most of all, to improve your relationships with you and your kids. A lot of times, I know for me, when my kids were in public school, it was a battle every day to get them on the bus to get to school because they hated going. And then they come home and it was a battle to find out, what is your homework? What are you supposed to be doing? And a battle to get that homework done. And you feel like they're never going to be motivated to learn anything. And they're just going to be this like leech on society. Okay. The reason they were so resistant to school was because it didn't intrigue them, wasn't interesting to them. And some they is telling your kids that this is what you have to learn right now for no apparent reason. It may not even be relevant to them at that time. So my encouragement is this is something new. There is a shift that happens, and your kids might surprise you. Your kids just might surprise you. Okay, so next slide. Okay, here is my book recommendation for going deeper. I highly, highly, highly recommend Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto. This is an awesome book. If you're not a big reader, get it on Audible and listen to it. Although I also like having books in paper so I can highlight them, whatever works for you. Get this book. They may or may not have it at your library, but I highly recommend Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto. Honestly, anything by John Taylor Gatto is going to be beneficial. Just quick, he was a public school teacher in the New York school system for 30 years. And he learned some things from behind the curtain that he shares in his writings that are very eye-opening. So that is all. I'm not going to spoil it at all. You have to read his books for yourself. But Weapons of Mass Instruction is at the top of my recommended reads for new homeschooling families. That is what I'm going to leave you with here. If you enjoyed this video, if you got anything out of it, please reach out to me and let me know. I would love to get your feedback. And I would love to have you join my community where I will be adding all kinds of courses, but starting with Homeschooling 101, which is this is video number 14, Homeschooling 101, to guide you through the process of leaving traditional school and shifting into homeschool with a clear path so that you can do that confidently. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have an amazing day.